Hello and welcome to the Whistling Podcast. My name is Chenggong Yao. Today's podcast is a reading of the Xiao Fu, or Rhapsody on Whistling, written by Chenggong. Chenggong lived from 231 to 273, Common Era. He was a renowned Jin Dynasty author of Fu. Fu is a rhapsody or poetic exposition, rhymed prose. I don't want to interrupt the poem, so I'll explain a few things before we begin. The first thing to explain is that Chinese music is based on a pentatonic scale. The Chinese pentatonic scale often has a raised or sharped fifth. I tried to use that scale to compose the background music for the last podcast, Gaffei is Whistling. I don't know whether I succeeded or not. I asked a Chinese musician friend whether it sounded Chinese or not, and his response was just one word: mysterious. The notes of the Chinese scale are gong,
gong,
shang,
shang,
zhui,
jiao,
zhi,
zhi,
and yu.
yu.
4 of those notes have correspondences to the 4 seasons. Zhi represents summer, yu represents winter, shang represents autumn, and zhui represents spring. The name Fei Lian is mentioned in the text. Fei Lian is roused in his dark cavern. Fei Lian is the Chinese god of wind. It's said that Chenggong once during hot weather received instruction and enlightenment from the wind and whistled, making his tune cool and clear. And following this, he composed the Xiao Fu, or Rhapsody on Whistling. I believe that's all you need to know to enjoy the Rhapsody on Whistling. So here we go. Rhapsody on Whistling by Chenggong. Part 1. A young gentleman, aloof from the crowd, eccentric in manner, fond of the strange, scornful of the world, oblivious of honor, abandons all worldly affairs. He admires the lofty-minded, yearns for the ancients, thinks of the distant, ponders the far-away. He will ascend Mount Ji to ennoble his character, or float the azure sea to let his mind wander free. And then he invites good friends, gathers about him like-minded companions. He has mastered the supreme subtleties of life and fate, discerned the dark secrets of the way and virtue. He grieves that the profane world is unenlightened, and that he alone, transcending all care, was the first to awaken. Stinted by the narrowness of the mundane road, he gazes on the concourse of heaven and treads on high. Removing himself from pomp and vulgarity, he becomes oblivious of self, and with strong feeling makes a long-drawn whistle. Part 2. And then when the spirit of brightness inclines its rays, pouring its light into murky shore, he goes roaming hand in hand with a friend, his pace leisurely and slow. He emits marvelous sounds from his vermilion lips, stirs mournful tunes from his glistening teeth. The sounds rise and fall, rolling within his throat. The breath pours forth from his mouth strong and heavy, then suddenly rises. He harmonizes yellow gong with clear jiao, blends shang and yu with flowing zhi. The whistle drifts like a wandering cloud in grand clarity, gathers like an unremitting breeze for a myriad leagues. When the tune is finished and the sounds cease, its lingering echoes may be savored without end. This truly is a perfect natural sound, which not even strings and winds can imitate. Thus, to make this sound one needs no instrument. To effect it one requires no other thing. He takes it near at hand from his own body, and does it by using his mind and controlling his breath. He simply moves his lips and there is a tune. He opens his mouth and creates a sound. Moved by whatever he encounters, he responds in kind, sings forth accordingly. The sound is loud but never boisterous. It is faint but never inaudible. In clarity and intensity, it matches syrinx and mouth organ. In richness and smoothness, it equals lute and zither. Its mysterious wonder is sufficient to commune with gods and awaken spirits. Its refined subtlety is sufficient to explore the hidden and fathom the deep. It restrains the mournful abandon of turbulent Chu, controls the extravagant dissipation of northern ward. It relieves a great flood with fiery drought, turns overpowering yang into double yin. Its tunes and songs have a myriad variations, and its modes and modulations have no end. They are harmonious and happy, joyful and gay, sad and sorrowful, depressing and dispiriting. At times the sound is deep and dispersed, as if about to break off. Then midway becomes high and shrill, spirited and strong. Slow with graceful restraint, it ambles at ease. Then a flurry of sounds rush off in a rousing crescendo. It can relieve feelings of brooding and care. Although the heart is grieved, it is never harmed. It garners the perfect harmonies of the 8 musical sounds, and truly reaches the height of pleasure without wild abandon. Part 3. If then one ascends a high terrace and looks down over the distance, opens his painted veranda and lets his gaze wander, heaving a sigh, head raised, he looks up and claps his hands, loudly giving out a long whistle that resounds clear and strong. Sometimes it is easy and relaxed, then turns itself back. Sometimes it is halting and hesitant, then races off again. Sometimes it is tender and supple, soft and yielding. Sometimes it roars and rushes like pounding waves. Resounding full and strong, it overflows, then drains off. Limpid tones drift about clear and smooth. Powerful bursts of breath gush forth, mingling and mixing in wild confusion. Huffing and puffing, it rises like a whirlwind. Twittering and tweeting, echoes respond. It renders the longing thoughts of the Hu horse, which leans into the cold wind on the northern frontier. It is like a wild goose leading its young, the flock crying out over the boreal desert. Thus, in accord with forms, he can create sounds, and following events he can compose tunes. He responds without limit to things. As swift as a snapping trigger, the echo resounds, troubled and tormented, bursting and flowing forth. It streams on and on like a long bank of clouds, now parted, now joined. It seems about to break off, then continues again. Fei Lian is roused in his dark cavern. A fierce tiger responds from within the valley. The southern winnow moves in the vaulted azure, and a fresh gale shakes through the tall trees. It dispels stagnant air, scattering and carrying it away, purges the murky turbidity of dusty haze. It affects the perfect harmony of yin and yang, and transforms the vile vulgarity of wanton customs. Part 4. If then one roams lofty ridges, crosses great mountains, he looks down from the side of a cliff, gazes on flowing rivers, sits on a giant rock, rinses his mouth in a clear spring. He makes a mat of the marsh bone set waving in the wind, lies in the shade of the bamboo, graceful and tall. Then, intoning and chanting, he gives forth a whistle, one tone after another continuously reverberating. He releases the grief and anger of pent-up thoughts, rouses the lingering torment of long-harbored care. His heart is cleansed and free of troubles. His mind, detached from the profane world, is as if drifting and floating. Part 5. If then it obtains a model from metal and leather, derives a pattern from pottery and gourd, a multitude of sounds would be played in unison, like reed pipe and like bamboo flute. Roaring and rumbling they thunderously resound, blasting and blaring with a deafening din. Emit the jur note, and at the peak of winter it becomes hot and humid. Release the u note, and severe frost withers things in summer. Stir the shang note, and autumn rainstorms fall in spring. Play the jiao note, and an east wind sings through the branches. The tones and harmonies are not constant. The tunes have no fixed measure. It goes forth but does not overflow. It stops but is never stagnant. From his mouth and lips the whistle comes forth. Carried on his fragrant breath, far away it travels. The tones, subtle and marvelous, flow off in echoes. The melody, rapid and abrupt, sounds clear and sharp. This truly is the most beautiful sound of nature. It is distinctive indeed, unmatched in the world. It surpasses shao, xia, and all-encompassing pond. Why merely point out its differences with the music of zheng and wei? Part 6. At the time it is played, Mianzhu becomes tongue-tied and bereft of vitality. Wang Bao closes his mouth and turns pale. Lord Yu stills his voice and ceases his song. Master Ning withdraws his hands and heaves a sigh. Zhong Qi throws down his zither and listens instead. Confucius forgets the taste of meat and stops eating. All the beasts begin to dance and stamp their feet. The phoenix comes in solemn demeanor and flaps its wings. From this one can know the marvelous beauty of the long-drawn whistle, for this indeed is the highest form of musical sound. The end.
Call action.
A call to action.
Call action.
Call to action.
A call to action.
A call to action. A call to action.
You can join the Whistling Podcast group on Facebook I now have a website, thewhistlingpodcast.com. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/The Whistling Podcast. And I also have a Quora site for discussions, thewhistlingpodcastspace.quora.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on The Whistling Podcast.